For 13 years the Orion Concord had been losing the war. Not slowly. Not honorably. Not in a way that allowed historians to soften the truth with words like withdrawal or strategic repositioning. They were losing completely. 13 years of burning fleets. 13 years of broken defense lines. 13 years of worlds going silent one by one until their names stopped being places and became memorial entries in military archives. The enemy had no official name at first. Different species called them different things. The Valkyrie called them the Ashen Tide. The Sular called them the Mouths of Night. The old Threxian records translated their presence as the Devouring Silence. But eventually, across every command center, refugee ship, and emergency broadcast, one word became common. The Nhar. Nobody knew where they came from. Nobody knew what they wanted. They did not negotiate. They did not answer signals. They did not issue demands. Their ships arrived from the dark between mapped systems, long black vessels that seemed less built than grown, their hulls folding and unfolding like something alive beneath torn fabric. Then they attacked. They did not conquer planets. They erased them. A military world, a farming moon, a trade station, a civilian habitat. The Nhar made no distinction. Anything capable of resistance was destroyed. Anything capable of communication was silenced. Anything capable of remembering was burned. In the first year, the Concord lost 12 frontier systems. In the third, the ancient Valkyrie defense ring collapsed after holding for 9,000 years. In the seventh, the Sular homeworld went dark while 300 million civilians were still waiting for evacuation. By the 10th year, 1/4 of Concord territory was gone. By the 13th, the Grand Council no longer asked how to win. It asked how many could be saved. Admiral Cale de Ros remembered the exact moment he understood that hope had left the room. It was not during a battle. It was not when the Nhar shattered the moon fortresses of Cauldron. It was not when the casualty projections passed numbers too large for most species to emotionally comprehend. It was during a council meeting. 72 representatives sat beneath the silver dome of Esterian Prime, surrounded by holographic maps of a galaxy bleeding red. Admirals, ministers, war elders, evacuation directors, and planetary governors stared at the same projection. The Nhar advance line. It moved every day. Never backward. Always forward. Grand Speaker Vale, who had ruled through 6 centuries of peace and 13 years of failure, looked at the assembled council and asked one question. How many ships do we need to evacuate the inner systems? Nobody spoke. Because everyone heard what he had really said. Not how do we stop them. Not how do we defeat them. How do we run? Admiral de Ros lowered his eyes. He had 4 arms, 2 hearts, and a tactical mind that had once been considered among the finest in the Concord. He had won border wars before most younger species had developed orbital industry. He had studied fleet theory for 180 years. Against the Nhar, none of it mattered. The Concord fought wars with formations, doctrine, firepower, and command hierarchy. The Nhar broke formations, ignored doctrine, absorbed firepower, killed command ships first. Every answer the Concord created lasted only until the next battle. Then the Nhar adapted, and that answer became another entry in the long record of failure. On the main display, another system changed color. Blue to red. Someone made a sound that might have been grief. De Ros did not look to see who. Then the chamber doors opened. A junior aide entered quickly, almost stumbling in her haste. Her uniform was marked with the white band of diplomatic intake, not military command. Grand Speaker Vale turned toward her. This chamber is sealed. I know, Speaker, the aide said. Her voice trembled. But there is a delegation requesting emergency audience. Vale's expression did not change. From which member world? The aide swallowed. They are not members. A faint ripple moved through the chamber. Vale leaned forward. Then why interrupt a war council? The aide looked once at the red map, then back at him. Because they say they want to join the war. For the first time in hours, every eye in the chamber turned toward her. De Ros felt something cold move through his chest. Not hope. Not yet. Something smaller. Curiosity. Grand Speaker Vale was silent for a moment. Then he asked, who are they? The aide checked the tablet in her shaking hands. They call themselves human. The humans arrived 3 days later. Nobody expected much. The Grand Council certainly did not. For 13 years, desperate worlds had requested emergency membership in the Orion Concord. Minor civilizations sought protection. Refugee governments offered resources they no longer possessed. Border systems begged for inclusion before the Nhar reached them. The answer was almost always the same. We will consider your request. Humanity, however, was different. They were not asking for protection. They were asking to fight. Admiral Kale the Rose reviewed their file twice before the meeting. Population, 11.2 billion. Interstellar capability, 74 years. Military technology, approximately 2 centuries behind Concord standards. Genetic modifications, minimal. Cybernetic integration, limited. Natural weapons, none. Defensive biology, unremarkable. Strategic significance, negligible. The assessment concluded with a sentence that several analysts had independently written. Humanity is courageous but unlikely to survive prolonged engagement against Nhar forces. The phrase appeared in 7 different reports. The Rose understood the reasoning. The humans were small, soft-skinned, fragile by almost every measurable standard. They lacked natural armor. They possessed no secondary nervous systems, no chemical defense organs, no enhanced sensory arrays. Compared to the ancient species of the Concord, they seemed painfully ordinary, which made their request all the more confusing. The council chamber filled slowly that morning. Representatives took their seats. Military advisors activated tactical displays. Translation systems synchronized across 43 active languages. At precisely the appointed hour, the great doors opened. 3 humans entered. No escorts. No ceremonial guards. No display of military strength. Simply 3 individuals walking with calm precision through a room filled with beings far older and larger than themselves. The first was a woman. Her hair contained strands of gray. Her posture was perfectly straight. She moved with an economy of motion that drew attention precisely because it appeared effortless. The second was a broad-shouldered man carrying a thin data case. The third was younger, perhaps no older than 40 by human standards, quietly observing everything without appearing to observe anything at all. The woman stopped at the center of the chamber. "My name is Director Elena Voss," she said. Her voice was neither loud nor dramatic. Yet the chamber became silent. "We represent the United Earth Coalition." Grand Speaker Vale inclined his head. "You requested emergency audience." "We did. And you wish to join a war that has consumed civilizations older than your species?" "Yes." The answer came immediately. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just yes. Vale folded his 4 hands together. "Director Voss, the Orion Concord appreciates your willingness to assist. But we must speak plainly." "We would prefer that," Voss said. "The Nhar have destroyed fleets that dwarf your entire military capacity. Species with 10,000 years of warfare experience have failed to halt them. Entire planetary defense networks have collapsed within hours." He paused. "Your people have possessed faster-than-light travel for less than a century." A murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. General Serac of the Valkyrie rose next. "With respect," he said carefully, "your courage honors you. But courage and capability are not identical things." Another representative added. "The Nhar do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They simply continue." The words were not cruel. They were sympathetic, which somehow felt worse. Admiral the Rose studied the humans. He expected frustration. Perhaps pride. Maybe anger. He found none. Director Voss simply listened. Patiently. As though the entire conversation was proceeding exactly as anticipated. When the council finished explaining why humanity could not meaningfully alter the course of the war, she nodded once. "I understand," she said. Grand Speaker Vale seemed relieved. "Then you see our concern." "I do." Silence. Then she asked a single question. "May we have a sector?" The chamber froze. Vale blinked. "A sector?" "A small one." The human woman folded her hands behind her back. "Somewhere you've already abandoned." No one spoke. She continued. "Somewhere strategically insignificant. Somewhere your fleets no longer operate because maintaining a presence is no longer worth the cost." General Serac frowned. "What would you do there?" "Fight." "With what?" Voss looked at him. "With the methods we understand." A long pause followed. Finally, Admiral the Rose activated the strategic map. One region blinked far from active operations. Sector 9 Lambda. 3 dead systems. 2 ruined colonies. 1 mining world stripped to bedrock. The Nhar had passed through 8 months earlier and were expected to return eventually. Nothing remained worth defending. The Concord had already written it off. "It exists," the Rose said. Sector 9 Lambda. Voss studied the projection. Population. Evacuated. Military assets? None. Strategic importance? None, Serac answered. Then we would like that sector. The council exchanged uncertain glances. Grand Speaker Vale sighed. Perhaps, he thought, this would give the humans purpose. Perhaps they needed to learn for themselves. Perhaps allowing them a symbolic contribution was kinder than refusing them entirely. You may have it, he said. The younger human beside Voss made a small note on his tablet. No celebration. No visible excitement. Only acknowledgement. Thank you, Voss said. Vale offered what he believed was compassion. When the situation becomes untenable, evacuation corridors will remain available to your people. The human woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not arrogance. Nor defiance. Just something strangely difficult to interpret. We appreciate your concern, Grand Speaker. She paused. But we're not planning to evacuate. The words settled heavily into the chamber. Nobody quite knew what to do with them. The meeting concluded shortly afterward. The human delegation departed as quietly as they had arrived. By evening, the matter had already faded from most conversations. There were larger concerns. Entire fleets to reposition. Billions of civilians to relocate. Another Nhar offensive expected within weeks. Sector 9 Lambda became an administrative footnote. A kindness offered to a young species that did not yet understand the scale of the darkness approaching. Admiral the Roast thought about them once before sleeping. The stillness of Director Voss. The absence of fear. The confidence without performance. It bothered him. He could not explain why. Then 8 months passed. And the first reports arrived from Sector 9 Lambda. The report arrived at 3:17 Central Concord time. Analyst Lyrason almost deleted it. Sector 9 Lambda had been categorized as inactive 8 months earlier. Automated systems still collected telemetry, but no one expected meaningful data from dead systems occupied by a species that erased everything it touched. Which was precisely why the report made no sense. Lyra read it once. Then a second time. Then a third. The numbers did not change. She checked the translation software. No errors. She verified the sensor signatures. No corruption. Finally, with growing unease, she activated a priority channel. Commander? Commander Jalen Vor looked up from his workstation. He belonged to the Sular species and had spent 13 years analyzing bad news. Entire professional instincts had been built around understanding disaster. The expression on Lyra's face disturbed him immediately. What happened? I think, she said carefully, we have a problem with the 9 Lambda telemetry. Vor walked over. Equipment failure? I thought so. Solar interference? No. Then what? Lyra turned the screen toward him. Silence. Commander Vor read the report. Then he read it again. His breathing slowed. No, he said quietly. Lyra said nothing. No, he repeated. Because according to the report, the Nhar fleet assigned to Sector 9 Lambda no longer existed. 43 vessels. Destroyed. Confirmed wreckage across 3 orbital zones. No retreat signatures. No jump activity. No unexplained disappearances. Destroyed. Every single one. Commander Vor sat down. The chair supported him with unnecessary gentleness. Who engaged them? Lyra enlarged the final section. The answer consisted of 2 words. Human forces. The room became very quiet. 43 Nhar ships. The Concord measured victories differently now. Destroying 1 vessel required enormous effort. Destroying 2 in a single engagement was considered exceptional. Entire military academies studied the rare battles where commanders had managed to eliminate 3. 43 belonged in mythology. Not reality. How long was the engagement? Vor asked. Lyra swallowed. 5 hours and 12 minutes. He stared. That's impossible. Yes. Sensor confirmation? Triple verified. Visual evidence? Confirmed. Energy signatures? She hesitated. Unknown. Now he looked at her. Unknown. They don't match anything in our weapons database. The silence deepened. The Orion Concord possessed military records spanning thousands of years. Every known energy system. Every propulsion method. Every offensive technology. Nothing matched the readings from 9 Lambda. Commander Vor reached for his communication panel. Wake Admiral the Rose. Immediately? Immediately. Across the station, emergency channels activated. Military analysts abandoned sleep. Strategic officers assembled in conference rooms. Within 2 hours, the highest levels of Concord Command were studying a battle that should not have existed. Admiral Kale the Roast stood before the projection in absolute stillness. 43 shattered icons drifted across the display. Nahar vessels. Destroyed. Not damaged. Destroyed. What were human losses? He asked. An officer checked the report. 3 patrol craft. The Roast turned slowly. 3? Yes, Admiral. The room remained silent. Someone finally asked the question everyone feared. How? Nobody had an answer. By noon, Grand Speaker Vale had personally requested communication with Director Elena Voss. The request took 2 days to fulfill. Apparently the humans were occupied. That detail alone unsettled the Roast. Occupied with what? They had just achieved something the combined fleets of the Orion Concord had failed to accomplish in 13 years. Surely this demanded celebration. Investigation. Discussion. Instead, the humans requested a delay. 3 days later, the connection opened. Director Voss appeared on the central screen. Admiral the Roast noticed several things immediately. She looked older. Not physically. Operationally. There was exhaustion behind her eyes. A healing cut crossed one side of her forehead. Her hair was shorter. And somehow, despite everything, she appeared calm. Director Voss, Grand Speaker Vale began, the Orion Concord extends its congratulations. Thank you, Voss replied. The destruction of 43 Nahar vessels represents the most successful engagement in recorded history. A small pause. It was a useful exercise, she said. Nobody spoke. The Roast frowned. An exercise? A field test. The Admiral stared. 43 Nahar warships. Yes. Destroyed in 5 hours. Yes. And you described this as a field test? Voss nodded. We needed practical validation before expanding operations. Silence. General Serac finally leaned forward. Director, the Concord has fought this enemy for 13 years. Yes. We have never achieved anything remotely comparable. I know. Then what exactly did you do? For the first time, Voss seemed to consider her answer carefully. We fought them differently. The statement was almost offensively simple. Grand Speaker Vale folded his hands. Different how? Another pause. The human director looked beyond the camera briefly, as though checking something unseen. Then she returned her attention to them. With respect, Grand Speaker. Her voice remained calm. You've been fighting a war. The room waited. We've been preparing a hunt. The words settled into the silence like stones dropped into deep water. Admiral the Roast felt something unfamiliar. Not disbelief. Not fear. Recognition. The kind that arrives before understanding. Because suddenly Director Voss's stillness made sense. The confidence. The absence of panic. The willingness to accept abandoned systems nobody else wanted. Humanity had never intended to defend 9 Lambda. They had intended to study it. To learn. To prepare. And now 43 Nahar ships were drifting as wreckage through empty space. Grand Speaker Vale found his voice. What happens next? Director Voss smiled very slightly. It was not a victorious expression. It was logistical. Practical. Almost routine. We continue setting up. The room remained motionless. Setting up for what? The Roast asked quietly. The answer came without hesitation. To push them back. Nobody in the Orion Concord had used those words in 13 years. Push them back. Retreat. Delay. Evacuation. Containment. These were familiar concepts. Advancing against the Nahar belonged to ancient history. Director Voss continued speaking as though discussing weather forecasts. We'll need another few months. A few months. Serac repeated. Approximately. Before what? The human woman folded her hands. Before we send in the quiet ones. The transmission ended 12 minutes later. No explanation accompanied the phrase. No operational details. No strategic briefing. Just 4 words. The quiet ones. For the next several weeks, the entire Orion Concord would attempt to understand what those words meant. And none of them would come remotely close to the truth. For the next 6 weeks, Admiral Kale the Roast became mildly obsessed. Not with the Nahar. Not with fleet movements. Not even with the impossible destruction of 43 enemy vessels. He became obsessed with 4 words. The quiet ones. The phrase appeared nowhere in Concord military doctrine. No translation matrices recognized it as a formal designation. Human diplomatic channels provided no clarification. Every request for additional information returned the same politely worded response. Operational details unavailable at this time. Which, the Roast had learned, was a human expression meaning. You are not supposed to know. So he started reading. Everything. Human history. Human military records. Human strategic theory. 273 separate documents. 3,000 years of archived conflicts. And with each passing day his concern grew. Because humanity fought wars differently. Every civilization in the Orion Concord approached warfare as an engineering problem. You built stronger ships, larger fleets, better weapons, improved defensive systems. Victory belonged to superior mathematics. Humanity, however, had treated war as something else entirely. A problem of minds, a contest of perception, an exercise in uncertainty. They had fought on mountains, in oceans, underground, inside cities, across deserts, in frozen wilderness, in complete darkness. They had fought enemies they could see, and enemies they could not. They had developed entire branches of military doctrine dedicated not to destroying armies, but to changing what those armies believed was happening. One phrase appeared repeatedly across centuries of human strategic literature. When conventional force cannot achieve the objective, send those who operate where ordinary rules no longer apply. DeRose read that sentence 12 times. It bothered him. Not because he misunderstood it, because he understood it too well. The Orion Concord had rules. Every species did. Wars occurred between fleets. Territory changed through open conflict. Victories required overwhelming force. Human history seemed to contain countless examples of people deciding that all of those assumptions were optional. He found references to things called special operations, deep reconnaissance, unconventional warfare, strategic infiltration, psychological operations, covert action. None translated perfectly into Concord languages. The closest equivalent concepts were fragmented and incomplete. Humanity appeared to have built entire institutions around the idea that the most important battlefield existed inside the enemy's understanding of reality. That realization kept DeRose awake. 3 weeks later the second report arrived, and the entire Orion Concord stopped breathing. The Nhar possessed command entities. The Confederation xenobiologists called them overseers. Gigantic organisms housed deep within protected vessels. Ancient, slow-moving, rarely visible. Every known Nhar fleet operated through them. Destroy an overseer, and the surrounding forces lost coordination for several minutes. The problem, unfortunately, was reaching one. Each overseer remained protected by fortified command ships, thousands of soldiers, multiple defensive layers, entire battle groups. No military force in 13 years had ever successfully eliminated one. Not one. The report from Sector 9 Lambda contained a sentence that changed history. One overseer neutralized. Admiral DeRose read it once. Then again. Then a third time. No supporting fleet engagement. No large-scale battle. No orbital bombardment. Just one dead overseer. He activated the attached operational summary. Team composition. 8 personnel. The room became completely silent. General Serac spoke first. 8. The analyst nodded. Yes, General. 8 humans entered Nhar command formation? Yes. How many defenders? Estimated 14,000. Nobody said anything. Because numbers sometimes became meaningless when arranged incorrectly. 14,000. Against 8. DeRose performed calculations automatically. Distance. Response times. Sensor coverage. Patrol density. Defensive redundancy. Every model produced identical conclusions. Impossible. And yet the overseer was dead. The 8 humans had entered. The 8 humans had left. The target had not survived. Admiral DeRose requested immediate communication with Director Voss. The connection opened 6 hours later. She looked tired. More tired than before. But not concerned. Never concerned. How? DeRose asked. No formalities. No introductions. Just the question. Director Voss considered him for a moment. That's what they do, she said. 8 people crossed 14,000 defenders. Yes. They reached a target nobody else has ever touched. Yes. They escaped. Yes. DeRose leaned forward. How? The human woman was quiet. Then she answered. They trained for a very long time. Silence. That isn't enough. No. Then what is? Another pause. And then Director Elena Voss gave the explanation that would become legendary throughout the Orion Concord. They're very good, she said softly. At not being where anyone expects them to be. The answer was infuriating. And somehow far more frightening than specifics would have been. Because mystery filled the spaces that information normally occupied. Unknown capabilities were infinitely larger than understood ones. What the Concord did not know, what nobody outside humanity knew, was what had happened during those 7 hours inside the Nhar formation. The 8 operators had entered through maintenance channels too narrow for Nhar biology. They wore adaptive thermal systems that mimicked surrounding temperatures. Their communication consisted entirely of hand signals practiced for over a decade. They moved only when movement mattered. They waited when waiting mattered more. At one point, 3 of them remained perfectly motionless for nearly 4 hours while a patrol route passed less than 3 meters away. They did not speak. They did not shift position. They simply became part of the environment. Human military instructors called this discipline. The Orion Concord had no equivalent word. The team leader was Master Sergeant Mara Cole, 36 years old, 14 years of operational experience, 12 successful deep field deployments. When she submitted her after-action report, her only criticism involved timing. Extraction route Delta had required 11 additional seconds. 11. The overseer was dead. 14,000 enemies had never known they existed. And Mara Cole was dissatisfied with 11 seconds. The report ended with a simple recommendation. Update infiltration models. Nothing more. No heroics. No celebration. Just improvement. 3 months after humanity joined the war, Admiral Theros finally understood what Director Voss had meant. The Quiet Ones were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were something older. Something humanity had spent thousands of years refining. They were hunters. And for the first time in 13 years, the Nhar were being hunted. The first indication that something fundamental had changed did not come from a battlefield. It came from statistics. Commander Lyra Sen noticed it during a routine analysis cycle. At first she assumed the data was corrupted. The Nhar had altered patrol patterns in 7 different sectors. Nothing unusual about that. They adapted constantly. What was unusual was the direction of the changes. Their command vessels were moving backward. Not retreating. Not abandoning territory. Simply relocating farther from active combat zones. Creating distance. Creating layers. Creating protection. Lyra checked the numbers again. The pattern remained. She activated an emergency review. Admiral Theros arrived 30 minutes later. What do you have? Lyra enlarged the tactical display. 7 sectors glowed before them. Red markers represented Nhar command ships. Blue arrows represented movement. Every single arrow pointed away from the front. They're protecting something, she said. Theros studied the map. Or someone. The realization settled heavily between them. For 13 years, the Nhar had demonstrated absolute confidence. Their command entities remained near operational centers because nothing could reach them. Nothing had ever needed to be feared. Until now. The room grew quiet. Human operators? Theros asked. Lyra nodded. Most likely. How many active deployments? Officially? Yes. 212. The Admiral remained silent. 212 individuals. Against an enemy force exceeding 14 million combatants. And 14 million soldiers were changing their entire strategic architecture because of them. It felt absurd. Which increasingly meant it was true. Director Voss explained it 3 days later. The Nhar understand fleets, she said. They understand firepower. They understand numbers. She folded her hands. They don't understand uncertainty. Admiral Theros considered that. Uncertainty? The possibility, Voss continued, that the danger is already behind you. Silence. The sentence lingered. Because every military civilization in the Concord thought in lines. Front lines. Supply lines. Defensive lines. Humanity apparently thought in circles. Or perhaps not at all. The reports kept coming. In Sector 12, a 2-person human team spent 19 days aboard a Nhar logistics vessel. They entered through a maintenance lock during orbital resupply. They lived behind thermal regulators. They consumed odorless ration compounds specifically designed to avoid biological detection. They mapped internal structures, recorded communication protocols, documented command behaviors. Then they left. The Nhar never discovered they had been there. In Sector 14, another team altered navigational markers. Nothing dramatic. No explosions. No sabotage. Tiny modifications. Subtle enough to pass diagnostics. Over the following month, Nhar supply convoys began arriving several hours late. No catastrophic failures. No obvious causes. Just delays. Small uncertainties. Questions without answers. Engineers blamed systems. Commanders blamed crews. Crews blamed environmental interference. Nobody blamed invisible humans. Not yet. The confusion spread. The quiet ones understood something ancient. People feared what they could not explain. Master Sergeant Mara Cole understood this better than most. She was on her 9th deep deployment. A cold world. Designation, Nhar 17. The planet possessed dense atmosphere, limited visibility, and sensor interference severe enough to frustrate conventional reconnaissance. Which made it perfect. Cole had requested a solo mission. Director Voss had objected. Briefly. Alone is slower, Voss said. Alone is quieter, Cole replied. The discussion ended there. For 11 days, Mara Cole moved through enemy territory without being seen. She traveled only at night. Slept in concealed positions during daylight hours. Memorized patrol schedules. Counted footsteps. Recorded sounds. Watched. Always watched. The installation she observed was unlike anything Concord intelligence had documented. Massive communication arrays stretched into the clouds. Signal towers hundreds of meters tall. Transmission systems powerful enough to coordinate operations across entire sectors. This was not a military outpost. It was infrastructure. The nervous system of war itself. Cole understood immediately. The Nhar were not acting instinctively. They were directed. Organized. Connected. Somewhere something planned. And planning meant vulnerability. She transmitted her findings. Director Voss responded with 3 words. Keep looking deeper. Mara smiled. The message contained exactly what she expected. No instructions. No pressure. Trust. Human Special Operations Doctrine operated on a simple principle. The person closest to the problem understood it best. Command existed to support decisions. Not replace them. On the 12th night, Cole noticed something unusual. Patrol density had increased. Not dramatically. Just enough. Soldiers paused longer at intersections. Sensor sweeps overlapped. Communication bursts occurred more frequently. The Nhar were being careful. That word spread through Concord intelligence circles quickly. Careful. Nobody had ever described the Nhar as careful. Relentless? Yes. Efficient? Certainly. Merciless? Without question. But careful implied caution. Caution implied uncertainty. And uncertainty implied fear. The xenobiologists resisted that conclusion. The Nhar possessed no known panic responses. No adrenaline equivalents. No measurable stress indicators. They processed threats mathematically. Emotionally neutral. Machine-like. Yet the data kept accumulating. Command ships moved farther back. Patrols increased. Security layers thickened. Response times accelerated. Something invisible had entered their calculations. Something they could neither locate nor understand. Back on Asterion Prime, Admiral Theros studied the reports. 212 humans. 14 million enemies. The mathematics remained absurd. He remembered reading old human military philosophy months earlier. One line returned unexpectedly. The purpose of special operations is not to destroy the enemy. It is to make the enemy question what is already true. He understood now. The Nhar no longer trusted their own territory. Every shadow carried possibility. Every unexplained delay carried meaning. Every strange sound demanded investigation. The quiet ones had accomplished something 13 years of warfare had failed to achieve. They had turned certainty into doubt. And doubt, once introduced, spread faster than fire. Far away, deep inside Nhar-controlled space, Master Sergeant Mara Cole lay motionless beneath frozen ground covering. A patrol passed 20 meters away. She did not move. Did not breathe deeply. Did not exist. The soldiers continued onward. Only after they disappeared beyond sensor range did she open her eyes. Something had changed. She could feel it. The enemy was searching. Not for armies. Not for fleets. For something small. Something unseen. Something patient. For the first time in recorded history, the hunters of 14 million worlds were afraid of the dark. The recording lasted 23 seconds. For 6 hours, nobody understood what they were hearing. The audio file had arrived with Master Sergeant Mara Cole's latest intelligence package from Nhar 17. Buried among transmission logs, patrol schedules, and infrastructure diagrams was a single annotation. Unknown vocalization. Repeated 3 times. Pattern does not match existing Nhar database. Recommend analysis. Under ordinary circumstances, such a note would have received routine attention. Nothing more. But nothing about the war was ordinary anymore. Dr. Celine Orvik listened to the sound for the 18th time. The xenobiologist belonged to the Sular species. For 11 years she had studied the Nhar. Their movement patterns. Their communication systems. Their collective behaviors. Entire careers had been built upon understanding an enemy that refused to explain itself. And this sound did not belong anywhere. Full, layered, complex. Not a command. Not coordination. Not aggression. Something older. Something deeper. She activated comparative models. Cross-referenced thousands of recordings. Expanded frequency analysis. The answer emerged slowly. And when it did, she stopped breathing. Immediately, she requested encrypted communication with Admiral the Rose. The Admiral arrived 20 minutes later. Dr. Orvik looked disturbed. Truly disturbed. "What is it?" the Rose asked. The scientist hesitated. "Admiral, I believe we've misunderstood the Nhar." Silence. "That is not a small statement." "No." She replayed the recording. The strange, layered sound filled the room. It carried an emotion without language. A memory without translation. Something primal. "What am I hearing?" Orvik swallowed. "Our closest approximation," she said carefully, "is a distress signal." The Rose remained still. "A distress signal?" "Yes." "That isn't possible. Neither is most of what humanity has been doing." The Admiral considered that. Unfortunately, she was correct. Orvik enlarged several waveforms. The pattern resembles ancient prey responses across multiple evolutionary models. "Explain." The scientist folded her hands. Long before civilizations existed, living creatures survived by recognizing predators. She pointed to the data. Sometimes those predators could be seen. Another line appeared. Sometimes they could not. A third. In such cases, many species developed warning behaviors. Silence. The warning wasn't, "I see danger." She looked at the Rose. It was, "Something dangerous is here and I cannot find it." The room became very quiet. Master Sergeant Mara Cole had spent 11 days inside Nhar territory. Undetected. Unseen. Unknown. And during those 11 days, the Nhar had begun producing distress signals. Not because they saw her. Because they felt her presence. The realization unsettled everyone involved. Admiral the Rose requested immediate communication with Director Voss. The connection opened an hour later. Voss listened to the recording twice. Eyes closed. Motionless. When it ended, she opened them. "Good," she said. The Rose blinked. "Good?" "Very. The Nhar are frightened." "Yes. We have never documented fear responses in 13 years. Voss nodded. "Everything fears something." The simplicity of the statement irritated him. "Director, this species has ignored catastrophic casualties. Entire fleets destroyed. Worlds lost. They have never altered behavior because of emotion." Voss leaned back. "You're thinking about fear incorrectly." Silence. "Fear isn't panic." She paused. "Fear is information." The Admiral said nothing. Something in their evolutionary history taught them that invisible threats were dangerous. Voss folded her hands. "Human history taught us the same lesson." The words carried unusual weight. "For thousands of years," she continued, "we hunted things stronger than us. Larger animals. Faster animals. More dangerous animals. We survived because we learned patience." The screen behind her displayed old Earth imagery. Forests. Mountains. Dark oceans. We learned how to disappear. Learned how to watch. Learned how to wait longer than whatever we were hunting. Her expression remained calm. "And eventually we learned how to do those things to each other." Admiral the Rose understood. Or rather, he began understanding. Humanity's greatest military innovation had never been technology. It had been psychology. They knew where minds broke because they possessed minds exactly like the ones they had spent thousands of years fighting. Other civilizations developed warfare externally. Humans developed it internally. The distinction terrified him. 3 days later, Commander Lyra Sen noticed another anomaly. Nhar patrol routes had changed again. No longer predictable. No longer efficient. Randomized. Irregular. Defensive. Soldiers doubled back unexpectedly. Command entities traveled with additional escorts. Sensor coverage increased in places of no strategic significance. The Nhar were searching. Searching for ghosts. Searching for predators they could sense but could not locate. The term spread quickly through intelligence divisions. Elevated vigilance. The phrase sounded clinical. Safe. Manageable. Everyone understood it meant something else. Unease. Master Sergeant Mara Cole continued her observations on Nhar 17. The communication installation stretched farther than initial estimates suggested. Signal arrays connected to deeper systems. Underground systems. Ancient systems. The structure possessed intentional design. Organization. Purpose. This was not an improvised war machine. It belonged to something larger. Something older. On the 14th night she heard the sound again. The same vocalization. Closer this time. Longer. Not one voice. Multiple. The Nhar soldiers moved differently afterward. More cautiously. They checked areas already inspected. Paused longer at intersections. Looked behind themselves. Mara remained hidden beneath thermal camouflage. Motionless. Invisible. Yet somehow. They knew. Not consciously. Not specifically. But some ancient instinct buried beneath millions of years of evolution recognized the truth. There was a hunter nearby. And they could not find it. Back on Asterion Prime, Grand Speaker Vale reviewed the latest intelligence summaries. 212 human operators. 14 million enemy combatants. And the enemy was becoming increasingly cautious. No military theory within the Orion Concord explained this. Humanity did. Director Voss called the phenomenon by an old Earth expression. Being haunted. Once someone believes you might already be there, she explained during a strategic briefing, they stop trusting empty spaces. Silence followed. Every dark corridor becomes a possibility. Every delay becomes intentional. Every unexplained sound acquires meaning. She looked at the assembled commanders. You don't have to destroy confidence. You only have to convince it that it might be wrong. Operation Deep Root received authorization 3 days later. 126 quiet ones. 12 teams. 6 sectors. Simultaneous insertion. The largest covert operation in human history. And somewhere deep inside Nhar-controlled territory, the ancient predators of the galaxy were already beginning to make sounds no one had ever heard before. The sounds of creatures that knew, without understanding how they knew, that something was hunting them. Operation Deep Root began on a Thursday. Human planners insisted on Thursday. Nobody in the Orion Concord understood why. Admiral Kale the Rose eventually asked Director Elena Voss directly, "Does Thursday possess strategic significance?" Voss thought about it. Not particularly. Then why Thursday? The human woman allowed herself a small smile. Because if you always wait for perfect conditions, you stop learning how to operate in imperfect ones. That answer somehow felt entirely consistent with everything humanity had done so far. The operation involved 126 personnel, 12 teams, 6 sectors, 12 critical objectives. The largest coordinated infiltration mission ever attempted by any species in recorded history. The Orion Concord moved fleets numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Humanity was preparing to alter the course of the war with 126 people. Grand Speaker Vale found the arithmetic offensive. Admiral the Rose found it increasingly believable. The mission brief lasted 4 hours. Confederation analysts provided strategic intelligence. Human operators provided methods. Together they had discovered something extraordinary. The communication hubs Master Sergeant Mara Cole had identified on Nhar 17 were not isolated facilities. They formed a network. Ancient. Distributed. Interconnected. Each node reinforced every other. Destroying one accomplished little. Destroying several simultaneously created opportunity. Not permanent opportunity. Nothing so dramatic. 48 hours. Perhaps less. 48 hours of confusion. 48 hours of imperfect information. 48 hours during which 14 million soldiers might stop acting as one mind and start acting as millions of separate parts. For the first time in 13 years, the Orion Concord possessed something it had nearly forgotten existed. An opening. Director Voss displayed the tactical map. 12 glowing points appeared across Nhar territory. Node 3. Node 7. Node 12. Her finger traced invisible pathways between them. If these fall in the correct sequence, signal coherence collapses. General Serac leaned forward. How long? 48 hours. The room remained silent. Because 48 hours sounded impossibly small. And impossibly enormous. Grand Speaker Vale finally spoke. What can our fleets accomplish in 48 hours? Director Voss looked at him. The expression on her face was unlike anything Admiral the Rose had previously seen. Not exhaustion. Not caution. Something closer to anticipation. That, she said quietly, is exactly the right question. Preparations accelerated immediately. For the first time in over a decade, Concord battle groups moved forward instead of backward. Dreadnoughts repositioned. Carrier formations assembled. Supply routes expanded toward contested sectors. The movement itself felt strange. Entire generations of officers had only known retreat. Advancement required different instincts, different expectations. Hope itself demanded practice. Meanwhile, the quiet ones disappeared. Insertion methods varied deliberately. Human doctrine emphasized unpredictability. Repetition was a gift to the enemy. Team 1 used abandoned mining tunnels. Team 4 entered through atmospheric disturbances. Team 8 employed captured maintenance infrastructure. Team 12 crossed 30 kilometers of frozen ocean beneath thermal camouflage. No two approaches resembled each other. Admiral LaRose watched 12 blue markers move across a sea of red symbols. He realized he was holding his breath. An unusual behavior for his species. Commander Lyrason noticed. "Admiral? I'm fine. You haven't moved for 23 minutes. LaRose stared at the display. 126 individuals. Yes. Against 14 million. Yes. He remained silent. Because the numbers no longer mattered. Or perhaps humanity had changed what numbers meant. Chief Warrant Officer Elias Navarro led Team 7. 42 years old. Former mountain infantry. Special operations experience spanning 18 years. The humans described him using a phrase Lyra struggled to translate. He knows how to disappear. His target sat within a mountainous moon occupied by approximately 200,000 Nhar personnel. The communication node itself had been built directly into bedrock. Fortified. Layered. Protected. Confederation analysts classified it as inaccessible. Navarro disagreed. 3 weeks earlier, he had requested geological surveys dating back 2 centuries. Nobody understood why. Now everyone did. Ancient cave systems ran beneath the mountain. Natural passages. Narrow. Cold. Invisible to conventional military thinking. The team spent 40 minutes swimming through underground rivers. Water temperatures approached lethal thresholds. Nobody complained. Nobody questioned. They emerged inside a forgotten cavern less than 2 kilometers from the objective. Navarro checked his timer. 4 minutes ahead of schedule. "Slow down," he said. One of his operators looked confused. "We're early." Exactly. Human military culture contained many ideas the Concord found unsettling. One of them was this. Never spend saved time carelessly. They waited. Moved carefully. Observed. The communication facility above them contained over 300 Nhar personnel. They intended to fight none of them. Their objective was not destruction. It was alteration. A small device. A precise insertion. A quiet lie embedded within a massive truth. The Confederation had designed the signal disruption algorithms. Humanity had designed delivery. It was, Director Voss noted, what cooperation actually looked like. 3 hours later, Team 7 transmitted 2 words. Node active. Across 6 sectors, 11 additional confirmations followed. 12 nodes. 12 teams. 126 operators. Every objective complete. Admiral LaRose watched the final marker change color. Something moved inside him. A feeling absent for 13 years. Not victory. Far too early. Not relief. The war remained enormous. No. The closest translation came from human language. Oh. Grand Speaker Vale appeared on the command display. Status. All teams successful, LaRose answered. The old leader closed his eyes. He had witnessed the collapse of civilizations. Watched worlds burn. Spent 13 years learning how to survive disappointment. Hope felt dangerous. And beautiful. How long? He asked. Commander Lyra checked the synchronization clock. 6 hours until activation. Vale nodded slowly. Move the fleets. Across Orion space, engines ignited. Ships that had spent a decade retreating turned themselves toward the enemy. For the first time in 13 years, the galaxy prepared to advance. And deep within Nhar territory, 126 quiet ones were already on their way home, leaving behind 12 tiny pieces of hardware. And a lie so small, so precise, that an empire of 14 million soldiers would soon build its own destruction around believing it. The signal went out exactly 6 hours later. Nothing exploded. Nothing went dark. No alarms sounded across Nhar territory. For several minutes, absolutely nothing happened. Which, according to Director Elena Voss, was precisely what success looked like. The 12 devices hidden inside the communication nodes activated simultaneously. They did not destroy data. They adjusted it. Coordinates shifted by fractions of degrees. Transmission priorities changed by percentages too small to trigger emergency diagnostics. Command confirmations arrived milliseconds out of sequence. Tiny imperfections. Tiny lies. Individually meaningless. Collectively catastrophic. The NHAR network remained operational. It simply stopped being true. Admiral Kale the Rose watched the tactical displays carefully. At first he saw nothing unusual. Fleet formations held. Supply routes remained intact. Communication traffic continued normally. Commander Lyra Sun frowned. "Are we certain the device is activated?" "Positive," Voss replied. "Then why?" "Because," the human interrupted gently. "Confusion takes time." The sentence proved prophetic. 3 hours later, the first anomalies appeared. A reinforcement group moved toward a sector that required no assistance. 2 logistics convoys arrived at identical coordinates. Command vessels requested status reports from fleets that had already changed position. Nothing dramatic. Nothing immediately catastrophic. Just friction. Human military theorists possessed a phrase for such conditions. The fog of war. The Orion Concord had never truly understood the concept. Their wars relied on perfect information. Precise coordination. Transparent command structures. The NHAR operated similarly. For 13 years, both sides had fought with certainty. Humanity, however, came from a civilization where certainty was considered temporary. And now they had introduced that philosophy into the heart of an empire. By hour 6, the cracks widened. By hour 9, entire sectors were acting on contradictory intelligence. The NHAR began making mistakes. Real mistakes. The kind no one had seen before. Grand Speaker Vale authorized the offensive. 12 dreadnought groups. 47 cruiser formations. 300 fighter wings. Simultaneous attacks across 6 sectors. The largest coordinated assault in Concord history. And for the first time, the NHAR were not ready. Sector 12 collapsed in 4 hours. 41 enemy vessels destroyed. Confederation losses. 7 fighters. Nothing more. Admiral the Rose stared at the casualty reports. For 11 years, a victory measured in single ships had been cause for celebration. Now entire fleets fell. Not because the Concord had grown stronger. Because the enemy no longer understood reality. Yet amidst the triumph, another story unfolded. Far beyond active combat zones. Far deeper than any previous mission. Master Sergeant Mara Cole moved alone. Again. NHAR intelligence infrastructure had revealed something unexpected during the deep root analysis. The communication network possessed a source. A central origin. Older than every military installation surrounding it. Older, perhaps, than the war itself. Dr. Celine Orvik had traced strange frequencies hidden beneath operational transmissions. Patterns. Rhythms. Something regular. Something ancient. Not commands. Not data. Something else. The closest translation she could manage was unsettling. A belonging signal. A continuous reminder transmitted across NHAR civilization. You are part of something. You are not alone. The collective endures. Nobody understood its purpose. Which meant humanity needed to understand it. And there existed exactly one person everyone trusted to go. Mara Cole volunteered before anyone asked. She had spent 16 years doing difficult things in impossible places. One more impossible place changed nothing. Director Voss reviewed the mission briefing in silence. "The distance alone," Admiral the Rose observed, "is extraordinary." 23 days, Cole answered. "Alone?" "Yes." The Admiral shook his head. No civilization in the Orion Concord trained individuals for such operations. No doctrine supported it. No psychology encouraged it. Humanity simply accepted that sometimes one person needed to walk into darkness and remain there for weeks. And so Mara went. 19 days later, she reached the installation. The world differed entirely from previous NHAR territories. Warm. Dense. Covered in vast layers of organic growth that absorbed sound itself. Movement became quiet naturally. The planet felt ancient. The structure at its center felt older. It did not resemble military architecture. That realization struck Mara immediately. Everything humanity had encountered so far served practical functions. Weapons. Communications. Logistics. War. This place was different. It had been built to mean something. The walls curved intentionally. Spaces existed for presence rather than efficiency. Symbols covered stone surfaces. Patterns repeated with variations too deliberate to be decorative. The Nhar had made art. Mara documented everything. Photographs, measurements, recordings, observations. 3 days passed. Then she entered the central chamber. The room stole her breath. A cylindrical structure stood alone beneath a ceiling lost in darkness. 2 meters high, ancient beyond comprehension, and emitting the signal. Not violently, not technologically, gently, like a heartbeat, like memory. Mara approached slowly. Something about the place demanded respect. Not fear. Respect. She activated recording equipment. Every angle, every frequency, every detail. Hours passed. Then movement caught her attention. A Nhar soldier entered. Mara disappeared behind a support pillar before the creature fully crossed the threshold. Stillness. Silence. Breathing slowed. The soldier approached the central structure. And then made the sound. The same sound she had heard weeks earlier. But different. Not distress. Not warning. Something softer. Something reverent. The being stood there for several minutes. Motionless. Listening. Remembering. Then it left. Mara remained hidden long afterward. A realization settled slowly inside her. This was not military infrastructure. This was heritage. The signal was not command coordination. It was identity. She transmitted her findings immediately. Dr. Orvik received the files at 4:11 station time. By 4:18 she had called Director Voss. Her voice shook. "We know what it is." Silence. "What?" "The signal." Orvik struggled for language. The closest translation across every known culture would be ancestral home. Director Voss said nothing. "The Nhar aren't receiving orders," Orvik continued. "They're receiving remembrance." The room remained quiet. "The signal tells them who they are." Another pause. "Where they came from." Another. "That they belong to something older than themselves." Director Voss leaned back. "And if we destroy it?" The xenobiologist hesitated. The answer arrived softly. "I don't believe they become weaker." Silence. "I believe they become lost." Far away, deep within enemy territory, Master Sergeant Mara Cole sat beside an ancient structure older than interstellar civilization itself. The war continued elsewhere. Ships burned. Fleets maneuvered. Empires fought. Yet in that moment, she understood something extraordinary. The monsters the galaxy feared possessed memories, heritage, history, and perhaps, beneath 13 years of war, they possessed something painfully familiar. A home. Director Elena Voss read Mara Cole's final transmission 3 times. The message was short. It contained no dramatic language, no speculation, no emotional commentary, just observations. That was how Mara worked. Facts first, understanding later. At the bottom of the report sat a single sentence. The structure possesses a manual shutdown mechanism. Accessible. Awaiting authorization. The room remained silent. Dr. Celine Orvik stared at the screen. Admiral Kale the Rose folded his upper arms. Grand Speaker Vale said nothing, because everyone understood what the question actually meant. Humanity possessed the ability to break the Nhar. Not militarily. Not strategically. Spiritually. The ancestral signal reached every known Nhar world. Every fleet. Every soldier. It reminded them continuously that they belonged to something ancient. Something greater than themselves. Remove that, and nobody knew what remained. The Rose finally spoke. "If we end the signal, the war ends faster." No one disagreed. Dr. Orvik answered quietly. "Yes." Silence. "But we do not know what else ends with it." More silence. Director Voss looked at Mara's transmission again. Then she activated a secure channel. Her response contained 4 words. "Do not touch it." Nothing more. No explanation. No justification. Just an order. 2 days later, Master Sergeant Mara Cole began her journey home. The extraction route had changed twice. Nhar patrol activity around the ancient installation had increased dramatically. They sensed something. Not specifically. Not consciously. But continuously. For 19 days the invisible predator had existed somewhere nearby. The distress calls never stopped. The Nhar searched. Found nothing. Searched again. Found nothing. The monster in the dark remained a story without a body. Meanwhile, across 6 active sectors the war transformed. The 48-hour disruption window ended. The communication corruption ceased. The Nhar network stabilized. Yet nothing returned to normal. Because victory had changed expectations. Confederation commanders no longer planned for survival. They planned for advancement. Sector 12 remained contested. Sector 14 held. Sector 17 reopened supply corridors abandoned 8 years earlier. Entire strategic assumptions collapsed. The impossible had happened. And once impossible things happened once, people began expecting them again. The final accounting shocked everyone. 219 HAR vessels destroyed. 5 command entities eliminated. 4 sectors reclaimed. Confederation losses. 23 ships. 811 personnel. Admiral Thoreau spent a long time looking at that number. 811 lives. Real lives. The scale of victory did not reduce their importance. He refused to allow mathematics to accomplish what grief should prevent. Then he looked at another number. Human operational casualties. 0. 126 entered. 126 returned. The statistic bothered him. Not because it was undesirable. Because it seemed impossible. He asked Director Voss directly. Statistically, he said, this should not occur. The human woman considered her answer. Statistics describe populations. Silence. My people aren't populations. She folded her hands. They're individuals. Thoreau frowned. That distinction changes probability? Sometimes. The admiral waited. Voss continued. People who choose difficult things perform differently than people assigned difficult things. The words settled heavily. Every one of them volunteered. Every one of them understood the risks. Every one of them decided that bringing the others home mattered more than anything else. She paused. Human special operations doctrine begins with a simple assumption. What assumption? Voss looked directly into the camera. Nobody gets left behind. The phrase spread throughout the Orion Concord within weeks. Nobody gets left behind. The concept fascinated military scholars. Most civilizations assigned personnel according to strategic necessity. Individuals served systems. Humanity appeared to construct systems around individuals. Teams mattered. Trust mattered. Shared hardship mattered. The quiet ones fought for civilizations. But they survived for each other. That difference proved significant. Mara Cole returned 4 days after the others. Then, exhausted, moving slowly, 24 days behind enemy lines, had extracted payment. She handed her equipment to logistics personnel, declined medical observation until after debriefing, and reported directly to Director Voss. The meeting lasted 6 hours. Admiral Thoreau attended the final portion. Mara described the ancient structure, the symbols, the architecture, the soldiers standing in silence before its center. Then she stopped. It's not a weapon, she said. Nobody spoke. It isn't strategic infrastructure. Another pause. It's theirs. The room remained utterly still. Everything else we've encountered serves war. She looked at Voss. That place serves memory. Director Voss understood immediately. The council will ask about it. Tell them no. Mara's voice remained calm. Tell them we're not in the business of taking people's history away. Silence. Even if they're trying to kill us? Thoreau asked quietly. Mara met his eyes. Especially then. No one argued. 3 weeks later, Commander Lyrason noticed something extraordinary. The Nhar had rebuilt their communication systems. Entirely. New encryption. New routing methods. Additional verification layers. Massive defensive investments. The scale of adaptation bordered on astonishing. General Serac admired it. They learned quickly. Commander Lyra shook her head. Look closer. The modifications focused on one thing. Detection. Intrusion. Anomalies. The Nhar were not improving offensive capability. They were improving awareness. Trying desperately to discover what had already happened to them. Admiral Thoreau stared at the analysis. The realization arrived slowly. They're defending against people. Not fleets. Not weapons. People. Director Voss confirmed it during the next council session. The Nhar understand conventional threats, she explained. They've spent centuries defeating conventional threats. She enlarged the tactical displays. What they don't understand is someone already being inside the perimeter. Silence. They're adapting to us. Grand Speaker Vale leaned forward. How many active operators now? 843. The chamber absorbed the number. Still tiny. Still absurdly small compared to millions of enemies. Yet enormous compared to where humanity had begun. With 200, Voss continued, we created opportunity. With 800 we maintain pressure. Her finger traced lines across contested space. Give us 5,000. The room remained silent. And the answer arrived without hesitation. We don't just disrupt their systems. She paused. We become part of them. A chill moved through the chamber. Not fear. Recognition. Because everyone understood. The war had changed. It no longer depended solely on ships, or armies, or territory. It depended on information, perception, patience. Humanity had introduced a new battlefield. And the Nahar. Ancient. Terrifying. Nearly unstoppable. Were learning, perhaps for the first time in their history, what it meant to be uncertain. The war lasted 4 more years. It did not end with a final battle. No legendary armada gathered at the edge of the galaxy. No ancient superweapon awakened beneath forgotten stars. No commander delivered a speech that changed history in a single afternoon. The end arrived the same way humanity had fought from the beginning. Quietly. Patiently. One careful step at a time. By the second year after Operation Deep Root, more than 4,000 operators had completed training. Most were human. Some were not. The Sular sent volunteers. The Velkari sent survivors whose worlds no longer existed. The Threxians contributed scouts who had spent their entire lives navigating dead systems. Human instructors taught all of them the same lessons. Move slowly. Observe first. Never assume. Bring everyone home. And above all, the enemy only knows what it can see. Make certain it sees the wrong things. Master Sergeant Mara Cole became something approaching a legend. She hated the attention. Legends implied distance, perfection, invulnerability. She possessed none of those things. She possessed experience, and scars, and patience. At 42 years old, she had spent nearly 5 years of her life inside hostile territory. She had conducted 219 operations. She had trained 311 new operators. Every graduate remembered the same final instruction. Getting in is important. Winning is important. Getting back is mandatory. The Nahar adapted. Of course they did. They always adapted. They developed irregular patrol patterns. They decentralized portions of their command structure. They created small protective units around senior leaders. They studied human methods. They tried to become difficult to find. Admiral Kale the Roche showed the intelligence reports to Mara one evening. They're learning from you, he observed. Mara studied the data. No, she said. The Admiral looked up. They're copying behaviors. Silence. We built those behaviors around trust. Another pause. That's harder to imitate. The Roche considered the statement. The difference. Mara leaned back. When you're responsible for 14 million soldiers, people become numbers. She looked at him. When you're responsible for 6 people who trust you with their lives, they become everything. The room remained quiet. Those 6 people, she continued softly, are why you come home. The final Nahar offensive began 22 months later. It was larger than anything previously recorded. New ship designs. New formations. New doctrines. They had spent years rebuilding, learning, preparing. The assault struck across multiple sectors simultaneously. For a moment, the old fear returned. The memory of 13 years of retreat. Then reality asserted itself. 3 things happened within the first 18 hours. A command vessel deviated from its assigned route after receiving incorrect navigational information. Fuel reserves in 2 sectors failed efficiency standards because supply contamination had occurred months earlier. An overseer redirected reinforcements toward positions that no longer required support. None of these failures were accidents. They had been arranged, patiently, quietly, by people already inside. The offensive collapsed. Not dramatically, not heroically. It simply stopped working. The Nahar could no longer trust their own information. Their commanders questioned reports. Their soldiers verified instructions repeatedly. Their coordination, once perfect, began to erode. And without coordination, they became mortal. For the first time in 17 years, the Central Front moved forward. Admiral the Rose stood on the command platform and watched red lines retreat across the tactical display. He did not cheer. Neither did anyone else. The moment felt too significant for celebration. Too heavy. Grand Speaker Vale called an emergency council session. He entered the chamber slowly. Older. Wearier. But lighter somehow. The sadness that had lived behind his eyes for 13 years had finally begun to loosen its grip. He looked around the assembled representatives. Then he spoke. We are going to win this war. Silence followed. Because he had never said those words before. Not once. Humanity continued working. No parades. No declarations. No demands for recognition. Director Elena Voss requested only 3 things. More time. More cooperation. More trust. She received all 3. The final years passed in increments. Communication networks failed. Command structures fractured. Supply chains deteriorated. The Nhar remained dangerous. Remained powerful. Remained terrifying. But they were no longer inevitable. The ancient installation Mara Cole had discovered remained untouched. Protected. Surrounded by Confederation forces. Respected. No one entered. No one interfered. Humanity insisted upon it. Some things, Director Voss argued, existed beyond strategy. The war finally ended on a quiet morning. No battle preceded it. No surrender followed it. The remaining Nhar fleets simply stopped. Not destroyed. Not routed. Stopped. The silence spread gradually. Ships powered down. Communications ceased. Movement ended. Xenobiologists argued for decades afterward about what had happened. Defeat? Acceptance? Something biological? Something spiritual? No consensus emerged. Mara Cole possessed a theory. She shared it with only one person. Director Voss listened without interruption. The signal, Mara said. The ancestral one. Voss nodded. I think they heard it. Silence. Really heard it. She thought about the ancient structure. The impossible age. The soldier standing quietly before it. The sound that was not fear. Not exactly. I think the war made too much noise. Another pause. And when the noise stopped, she shrugged. Maybe they remembered who they were. Director Voss considered that. Then she said one word. Maybe. On the day peace was officially declared, Mara Cole sat alone in a briefing room. Planning documents remained spread across the table. Habit. The news arrived quietly. The final confirmation. The war was over. She looked at the message for a long time. No triumph came. No celebration. Just stillness. The particular stillness that follows carrying something heavy for so long that your body forgets how to set it down. Eventually, she returned to organizing her papers. There would be reconstruction. Diplomacy. Training. Recovery. There were always things to do. Admiral Kale the Rose submitted the final military assessment 6 months later. The document became required reading across the Orion Concord. It analyzed strategy, operations, logistics, doctrine, human training philosophies, everything. Yet one paragraph endured above all others. Read. We invited humanity into this war because we believed we had nothing left to lose. We offered them abandoned sectors and impossible odds. We expected courage. We did not expect transformation. They did not bring larger fleets. They did not bring stronger weapons. They brought patience. They brought preparation. They brought individuals who had spent their entire history learning how to move unseen through darkness and uncertainty. The Nhar called them many things. The translation appearing most frequently in captured communications is remarkably simple. The ones already here. I believe this is accurate. They were already there. In the shadows. In the silence. Watching. Learning. Waiting. And when the moment finally arrived, they acted with a precision that no civilization in our history had imagined possible. The greatest weapon humanity ever gave us was not technology. It was the understanding that no enemy is invincible once someone patient enough has found the space between certainty and truth. I am profoundly grateful that the quiet ones walked beside us, and not against us. And throughout the worlds of the Orion Concord, generations yet unborn would remember a lesson learned at extraordinary cost. When the darkness came, humanity did not send armies first. Humanity sent the quiet ones.